Welcome, everyone. We see everyone starting to flood in, and we are so excited because this is our first ever time partnering together with Global Women's Leadership Network and CUWLA, the Credit Union Women's Leadership Alliance. So we are honoring International Women's Month, and we just want to welcome everyone and have a quick hello before we get started.
Hello, everyone. Put your names in the chat. Say hello. Tell us where you're joining us from, what exotic part of the planet, hopefully, with not a lot of snow like we have here in Madison. Please, please.
And as a reminder, we are recording today's session, and we would love to have your cameras turned on. We would love to see everyone's beautiful faces as we interact today.
All righty.
All right. We are going to jump right in. We have a jam-packed agenda, but before we do that, we want to honor our attendees and also make sure that we have a note of who it is that we are interacting with today. So I am Corlinda Wooden. I am the president and co-founder of Wooden Consulting, but I also support CUWLA, and I have the honor of working with Miss Linda White. And Miss Linda, if you want to wave and show everybody hello. Linda is the Executive Director of Credit Union Women's Leadership Alliance, and she is a founding member of CUWLA and has led organizations as Executive Director since 2022. She spent 37 years with Upward Credit Union, serving as CEO for over 2 decades, and she's a highly respected leader in our movement and continues to give back through CUWLA and her local community, which also includes leading her sister society where she is in California. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Corlinda. It's glad to be here and see all these people.
Yes. Next up, we have Lena Giakoumopoulos, and Lena is the Director of Global Women's Leadership Network at Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions. Lena brings more than 30 years of international experience across communications, education, and financial services, having worked in over 30 countries. Since 2018, she has led Global Women's Global Growth, expanding its reach and impact around the world, and she was recently honored with the network's first Pink Gem Award in recognition of her leadership. So welcome, Lena.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I also welcome our community here too, Corlinda, the GWLN Greater Family, as I call them. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Truly a pleasure to have you here and very happy to be partnering with CUWLA for the first time. So, welcome.
Wonderful. All right, before we get started, we also wanted to just take a moment and say that today is all about community. And when we think about the global women's community and the CULA community, it really means that we are not alone. We are coming together to support each other, and that's what we want to celebrate today. And so with that, we want to have a space for reflection, connection, encouragement. And so we encourage you, as we said earlier, keep your cameras on, throw communication in the chat, and we're going to hear from some amazing women leaders. But we know that this is never a solo journey, and community is what sustains us. So with that, let's actually dive in and talk a little bit more about Women's History Month. So it began as a Women's History Week in 1981. It actually expanded into a full month in 1987, and that was to recognize the contributions of women across industries and communities. In the US, it wasn't until 1974 with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act that women could apply for credit in their own name without a male cosigner. And when you think about that, like that is a time when many of us have experienced and lived in. This is not new or, ancient history. This is new history. And many of us can remember a time when we couldn't open a credit card on our own, or we needed a husband or a father to sign for a loan, and business credit was difficult to access for a woman. This milestone is only about 50 years old. And why that matters for us in the credit union community is because we are built for people helping people. We are built for expanding access and opportunity, and women have always been central to that mission. So we have frontline staff, we have community educators, we have operational leaders, and now we have CEOs and board members. So this is our time to shine. And in many cases, when we think about when women couldn't lead, we are leading more visibly now than ever in the financial industry. And that didn't happen in isolation. It happened because women came together. women mentored each other, women supported each other, and we've built communities. And that is the same spirit that we see each and every day with Global Women's Leadership Network and Credit Union Women's Leadership Alliance with CUWLA. So that brings us into our conversation today, where we want to talk through, and we'll kick it off first with you, Lena, and just talk through, what are some ways that you at Global Women's Leadership Network have been able to connect women across countries, cultures, and credit union systems. So
Thanks,
first
Carl.
question.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I mean, I don't want to get into the details of the nuances of the day-to-day work, but I think the most important thing is the magic word that you use, right? Connection. Because in all of our work, whether you are coming in as a Global Women's member, right, which we encourage everyone, that's the first point of entry to Global Women's, or if you come in to attend as a guest at a sister society event or at a GWLN event, the key, I guess, denominator, the key factor is connection. And it doesn't matter what language I think you speak. It doesn't matter, what country or culture you come from. But what is important is for the individuals to come together and connect. And many, many times what we've seen in Global Women's, there are many more similarities across the languages and the cultures and the countries than there are actually differences, especially when it comes to women in leadership and women wanting to ascend into leadership, whatever that leadership role may be, right? One big thing that we highlight is we are not here to make every woman a CEO for GWLN, right? I will let CUWLA speak for CUWLA. For Global Women's, it is about being able to give women the resources and the things that they need to be able to get to that next leadership role or to the leadership role which they desire, whether it is a VP of marketing, a chief information officer, a CEO, or a leader of the call center, right? If we're talking specifics about our area. But the common denominator, I think, across the board is the sense of connection, and that comes through this community. And I think that's one of the ongoing, evolving, and ever developing parts of our work.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that you talk about the community, but you also have heart. How would you describe the heart of Global Women's Leadership Network?
Um, we have lots of hearts, okay? Because we have a because we have a community, and I think I've seen individuals come into Global Women's, right, because they truly believe in the power of the women coming together and helping bring more women up, right? If we join forces together, if we come together, and not just women, right? All professionals in our industry to help elevate the women, they come into that and they truly believe that, and that's how you do feel the heart. You have other individuals who come in, it's like, oh, my boss told me I need to get engaged here, so thank you for that introduction, and then how do you want to get engaged, and then you connect them with someone else, and then the story unfolds that way. So I think you just have to be authentic. You have to really tell the truths that sometimes people do not want to hear, right? The numbers are not good for women in leadership. We're going 4 years away from the UN 2030 agenda, and we are far from, the numbers where we should have been years ago. So sometimes you have to really, really tell those truths and be able to stand their ground, but also want to inspire and encourage. So everyone does come with their heart and brings in many, many more hearts with them. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
Those are my thoughts. And
yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have a lot of opinions. I mean, good opinions, right? Because there's a different ways you approach it, right? Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
So speaking of different ways of approaching it, so one of the things that is newer is to have sister societies. Tell us more about sister societies and what makes them so powerful.
The Sister Society model actually came to be for Global Women's. Initially, when the program started, the women would come together pretty much once a year at the annual World Credit Union Conference, which, for our audience who doesn't know, it's the premier conference event that we hold from the World Council community for the global credit union movement, right? It happens every July. It rotates in different locations around the globe, and they would meet there each year. And that wasn't for a very healthy gathering of the community at that stage. So the concept of the sister society model came to be, and I'm glad Linda is here on the call because Linda was actually one of the women who helped start the first sister society in the United States system, right? Which was San Francisco Bay Area, which in essence was the convening of leaders and women who were part of different credit unions or different industry partners or service organizations who wanted to come together, in essence, learn from each other, help elevate each other, and actually connect, right? And just sort of create that first initial bond. And that's how the model came to be. And then from there, we had a few more trickle through across the United States, a few more in California, and then a couple other of our member countries on the World Council side took a step and said we want to form more in our country, in our nation, in our area, in our locale. The model has evolved. It is a volunteer-based network, right? I always say this, these are full-time professionals, these are full-time family people who choose to volunteer their time to help create a meeting, help create a gathering, help elevate women, join and learn from each other and share resources. So I think really it's a strong model. Definitely there is room for growth and improvement in how we do it. And what I've seen is it has morphed differently depending on how the co-leaders want to take it and run with it, right? We provide the guide documents, we provide some initial startup information from Global Women's Central, but then I've seen, for example, the California one does things a little differently than the Florida, right? The Manila, Philippines does things a little differently than Uganda, right? Brazil has a whole other model that focuses not just on the women working in the credit unions, but actually the members that they're serving, right? So that makes for a bigger impact. So definitely more room for growth there. I love the sister society concept, and one of the first questions we always ask is, okay, what area do we have a sister society? And if you go to the map on the website, right, you can see if there's a pin there. And we get a lot of outreach from individuals. And it's funny because our new team member this week, she's been here less than 2 weeks, and we've already received 3 inquiries for new sister societies. Coincidentally, we just talked about it yesterday. So I think it's a great way to convene and bring together the members, but also a great way also to learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just a true testament. 3 in just a week is showing the value that these are providing. So,
Yeah.
so wonderful to hear. You mentioned a couple of the global sister societies. So let's transition over to the global network for a moment.
Okay.
And can you share a story of impact from the global network?
I struggled with this question because I have 3 I want to share, and I know we're on time, so I'm going to make them quick just to show the differences and how it differs, right? I'll start with the U.S. Executive Readiness Summit. It was a couple of years ago. It was a woman from the U.S. system. She was from a credit union, I believe in Massachusetts. She came to attend this event. It's a more intimate, more workshop focused educational session that Global Women's puts on for women at that time in the U.S. system, hopefully evolving it to the international level. And she came, she listened to the speakers, participated in the activities, learned and joined, and about 10 days later, I received an email and it said, thank you, Global Women's, right? I took my learnings, I took my how to ask for a promotion model that was shared at that session. And I went in and I asked for my promotion, and I'm happy to share this is my new position. These are going to be my new responsibilities. Thank you, Global Women's, for giving me that opportunity, right? And it really touched my heart because it was the beginning of my journey with Global Women's, which really elevated things to a different level, and just sort of, I was like, wow, this is in action what is happening, right? Now I'll go over to the other part of the world, right? And I shared this story with a couple individuals. I also shared it recently at GAC because I think it is very impactful. It is from a CEO in the northern part of Manila in the Philippines. They went and they found a group of an indigenous population that was making brooms for their community and were just selling them at the local market for whatever prices they could get. And one of her team members brought this to her attention, and they drove up and they found these individuals, this community that had no financial education and no concept of the idea of the cooperative model or the co-op or the credit union, and they were saving the monies that they were receiving and they were putting them in tin cans and burying them in the ground. So the CEO, with worked with her team, and they opened up accounts, right? These were individuals that many of them were illiterate, so they worked with their children to open accounts and have them have a better life, right? That for me doesn't have to do with professional development of that CEO, but that has to do with the impact that this CEO is making in her community. And the one last one, we'll go back from Asia and we'll come to Africa. We had a GWLN scholar from Uganda. Amazing woman came, won the opportunity to come to the World Credit Union Conference through her scholarship and attended that year. I don't recall what country it was in. We came back about a month and a half later. She emailed us and thanked us for the opportunity because she said, in her sharing the story and her experiences and her learnings with her spouse, he understood the importance and the value of belonging to a community and belonging to this global network. And then I was just in tears for about a day, but it was just so impactful for me. And I shared it out because I think it really shows the value of what GWLN is. And I know I went on, but 3 different
Oh my gosh.
examples hopefully just gave you an idea.
Yeah, I don't think you were going on at all. I think you were very succinct and they were very powerful. And when you think about, each community has a different need. And that's what we're
Right.
hearing in this story that you're talking about. And the other thing that really resonates is the impact. I mean, I have goosebumps hearing these and just thinking about the ripple effect and the power of what that can do across the globe. So thank you for sharing that. And, when you think about community, we've talked about community a lot. What do you notice in when you're thinking about different aspects of how community shows up differently across the world?
Um, it's one of my first questions actually that I ask when I speak with someone who is looking to speak with us or present to our community. I always ask, have you shared in front of an international audience? And does that mean Canada only in your mind, or does it mean beyond Canada? Not knocking my Canada friends. Hello over there, my friends from e-leadership. I see you there. Not knocking them, but saying, do you understand what it means to deliver to an international community? Because not all audiences and not all terms resonate the same in the English language, even if they are interpreted. And you really have to understand your audiences. So it is understanding how I work with the Brazilian audience. It is understanding how we work with the women in Latin America or the women in Asia. The rhythm, the pace, the nuances, the cultural and societal norms are very, very important. So you have to take those into account, I think, when you're thinking about your community. And that goes with if you're working with the United States. I see women work differently in the South than they do in New York, right? I grew up in Rochester, New York. And when I came to this Midwest area, I said, you people are just too nice in the Midwest. That's not how it is on the East Coast, right? So you have to understand your area and your people to be able to engage with them and sort of meet them where they are. I think that's what's important. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that you hinted at too is that we can learn from all these different perspectives. And so
Mm-hmm.
having Global Women's Leadership Network be that hub, if you will, it is like a huge pool for best practice sharing across the globe, which is amazing. So
It is.
thank you,
It is.
Lena. We'll come back once we do group conversation in a minute, but
Sure.
now we're going to turn it over to Linda White. So Linda, as a reminder, is our Executive Director of CUWLA, Credit Union Women's Leadership Alliance. And CUWLA supports women and women leaders reporting to CEOs. So it's female CEOs and those that report to CEOs for smaller credit unions under 500 million in assets. So Linda, let's hear from you. What inspired the creation of CUWLA?
Well, first of all, I want to say I am like amazed at the women I see on here because some of you I've worked with sister societies, other credit unions, and I'm in awe. And then like Lena and I were talking, having gone to Asia to see what it looks like internationally with what women are doing there. It's just awesome. So thank you, Corlinda. So CULA was founded back in 2019 when we came together to decide if there should be something like this. At that time, credit unions, I'm going to say we look at like 300 million under was where we were. So we'll just say 500 because that's our new thing. Back then, over 60% of the credit unions of that asset size were run by women. So that's a big voice. And did they have a voice collectively to come together? And so we had made that decision. 13 of us came together to kind of go, yes, there is a need to have something that is women only, and they were CEOs, and then that guideline at that time was 300 million. And when we had that conversation, we even talked about Global Women's Leadership Network, because again, I was a co-leader of the first Sister Society. It was 2012, Lena, can you believe that? And it's just like, what are the differences and the nuances? Because we very much respect and support, and actually, oftentimes I'm referring people to global women that are not qualified to join CUWLA. So that's how we started out.
That is amazing. And just really quick, because I know I think it's a fun statistic. Like, what triggered the change from 300 to 500 million?
Well, people were ringing on our bell and saying, I'd like to join. And they were just over 300 million. And we looked, and the board met, and we said, what does this look like? Because at the time I was still a board member. Between 300 and 500, it's less than 100 credit unions. The other thing is as we had our own members that were starting to bump up to and become really involved, they were getting ready to hit that plateau. So we're like, we don't want to lose members just as they became members and saw the value of the alliance. It was also that, what are those women between 300 and 500? Where do they go? What voice do they have? Because is 500 really that much bigger? Well, in some senses, we have members that are 5 million in assets. But we just really felt that was a really good place to have those women, because a lot of women in smaller credit unions grow up in their credit unions. So maybe those women from those 350, $400 million credit unions started out in their credit unions when they were much smaller. So we didn't want to kick them to the curb. We wanted them to have a place to come in and share in that conversation.
Yeah. It reiterates the sense of community again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Having that safe space.
Yes. So speaking of safe space, how is CUWLA different from traditional networks?
Yes, it's just that, to have that safe space to come on and show up and be your authentic self, and to learn from your peers things that you may not know. That, I always say, and I keep saying it more and more these days, you don't know what you don't know. And as I said earlier, women in smaller credit unions grow up in their credit unions. The key is, are they growing with their credit unions? So if you became a CEO and you were the teller, and then one day there was an opening and now you're the manager, like, you don't know what you're supposed to do. And how do you have that comfort to ask somebody and say, I don't know how to read my general ledger and balance it, or read the balance sheet? How do you show up and ask that question, and to really have that safe space to talk to one another? And this is nothing against our male counterparts, because we often have times ask that, not so much anymore. But in the beginning, people would say, why is it women only? Aren't there men? And truth be told, in the beginning, we originally were going to be a co-ed organization. And it was at dinner that night over cocktails, people got loose, and it said, we've had something like this in our area, and the conversation's just different. So how do we do that and have that? That's why we landed on women. So it's nothing against our counterparts that are men. It's just that women do speak differently. And I'll give an example of an organization, or it was a group setting where somebody asked a question virtually about how to get raises for their employees. And it was a small credit union, I could tell, like 3 employees. And the response that she got, I knew it was a woman, from a male counterpart was, well, why are you asking that? The board only has 1 employee, it's you. Why? It was a lot of whys and you should have. So fast forward a few years to CUWLA being formed, and our CEOs have a platform that they're able to communicate and ask anything that they want. And a very similar question came from now a pretty bigger credit union asking that same question. And instead of saying, why didn't you, or you should, the response was much like, oh, that's how we used to do it at my credit union, and this is how I handled it. And to give them that comfort of how you ask those questions and not being ridiculed, but supported. So that is a lot of what we're doing as the Alliance for that safe space, and including sometimes maybe it's like shedding a tear because you're really frustrated with what's going on in the day.
Yeah, yeah. And oftentimes, when you think about shedding a tear, what comes to mind is your comment of virtual hugs.
Yeah.
And, so talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that our CUWLA community helps address.
So now we have, and I don't know, we could touch on this. We have CUWLA CEOs, which are women up to 500 million assets. And as Corlinda said, also the women that report to the CEO. So CUWLA Rise was formed in last year, and those are the women that report to the CEO of a credit union up to 500 million. And that could be a male or female ran credit union. So we do have members on here. I see that their CEO is a male. But some of the challenges both of them face, so I'll go to the CUWLA CEOs because they've been around longer. It could be anything from and our CUWLA Rise members, they're not talking about you. We might have a post that says, talk me off the cliff. And that might be, I'm having a challenge with, I have a really good star employee that made this horrific mistake. How do we navigate through that? It's a good person. What does that look like? It could be, the regulators like biting at my heels and they're writing me up for something that is not appropriate. And how do you get that support to kind of like say, this is how you might want to handle this, or again, this is how I've had that. So it's really that's some of the challenges. And we've had members say, if it wasn't for CUWLA, I would have quit, because being a CEO of a smaller credit union is not always the easiest thing, because again, where do you go? And you've got so many things you need to do. One day you're helping an employee, the next day you're helping a member, the next day you might be trying to, my least favorite thing when I was a CEO before we grew was having to do IT, because if it was me, I would have pulled all the cords out of the ball and screaming I did. And the other thing we hear from our members is, where was CUWLA when I became a CEO X years ago? So now we're going to say 6 years ago, because we've been around for 6 years now. So it's just to see that virtual hug happening all the time within the members and the group. And with the CUWLA Rise members, they are all women, but they are all not CEOs. But when we have their monthly meetings, both groups have their own separate meetings where they can come on and share anything. With them, we say, you're women, you may all have different roles, but you all have employees and you all report to the CEO. So you have projects, you have personnel, you have members that you're dealing with. How do you commonly support each other when you look at it that way? So like I said, they've only been around for less than a year, but the more they meet, the more they're getting to know each other and see those nuances and how they can support each other, even though their roles may not be the same. And as to Lena's point, do they aspire to the CEO? Some may not. So how do we help them be the best person that they can be? And then also encourage them to become members of Global Women's and find their local sister society.
Yes, yes. We always are cross-referring, that is for sure. Last question for you, Linda, and then we're going to turn it over to some of our members. But when you think about what happens to women leaders when they realize, so you'd mentioned, if it weren't for CUWLA, I wouldn't be here today still. Tell us more about some of that impact of like when women of CUWLA realize that they're not alone.
Just to hear that and the referral to other women that can become members of CUWLA, because we're an alliance, and that alliance means that you give and you get. So it's not always about them. It's about how do they pay it forward to another peer, to an employee. It's just really supporting and uplifting each other, and every aspect of the role is really that differentiator, and just that key to help people move forward and not be alone. Does that answer the question, Corlinda? I know sometimes, I squirrel.
No, that was beautiful. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. All right, so now we want to hear firsthand from some of our members of Global Women's and CUWLA to talk about what does community mean for them. So first up, we have Kira Davis. Kira is the CEO of Metro Moneywise Credit Union, and she has more than 25 years of experience in the credit union movement and a deep commitment to financial inclusion. In addition to her CEO role, she leads a collaboration of 14 credit unions in Greater Manchester and serves as chair of the UK's Global Women's Leadership Network. Kira, we are so glad to have you join us today. We would love for you to tell us about your sister society and the women leaders that you represent.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. So yeah, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and then about our sister society and how we came about. So my credit union is based in Rochdale. Has anyone heard of Rochdale, which is the home of the co-op movement? So the very first co-op shop, and we serve mainly a public sector credit union base. So people working in teaching, in local government, and our National Health Service. So we've been going since 1990, and a lot of the UK's credit union movement is actually very small in comparison to particularly the US and other movements. So when you talked about a small credit union being less than 500 million, we would be considered a large credit union within the UK system with assets of 13 million. So it gives you a little bit of context. So our average credit union would be around that 5 million asset base, 5,000 members. So just gives you a bit, very, very different in terms of size. But listening to Linda and then also Lena, the story is very similar. And that's what community is, isn't it? Our stories and our origins are very, very similar. So typically within UK credit unions, it's female leaders, smaller organisations, grassroots organisations. Credit unions have been going about 20 to 30 years, often with that female starting as a volunteer or the first employee and built that credit union up from the ground up. So we've got a lot of female leaders within the UK system. But that's not always the case. So during COVID, my credit union reached that 10 million asset mark, and we were invited to join our large credit union forum, which our national trade body organised. So I was early, dead keen, and sat waiting to see who's going to arrive. And as the boxes started to appear, what I noticed was it was predominantly men that were in those larger credit union positions. I'm thinking, hold on, this doesn't resonate with my understanding of the UK credit union movement. It's predominantly women, predominantly female membership as well. So where are the women in these squares? So I really started to question actually what's going on here, and it's not hard to understand what's going on, is it? These are better paid roles, they're bigger credit unions, and therefore it's more men taking on those positions. So what I also noticed as well is a lot of those women that have built their credit unions for 20, 30 years, we're starting to see some of those people retire now. And so those better paid credit union positions, CEO roles, are going out to advertisement. And too many times I've seen them go to men from mainstream financial services and not the deputy CEO or, the woman that sits behind the CEO that's been there for a long time. So that doesn't, we welcome men outside the sector, obviously, but to me, it was like, well, what's going on here? Why are these women not stepping up into that leadership position? So there was one lady I know who was in that position, and I said,
Here froze a little bit. We'll give her a second. See if she
Did we
can
lose
come
her?
back.
Did we lose her?
did I freeze there?
Oh, now you're back.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
That's okay.
Send unstable connection. I'm going to get my kids off the Wi-Fi. Is that okay?
That's a good plan.
At our recent AGM online, my daughter screaming from the toilet. So this happens as women, doesn't it? So forgive me.
It so does. It very much does.
Right. Apologies for that. So I met this lady, didn't really know her very well, and I said, why didn't you apply for that role? You would have been perfect. She was well known in the sector for being really competent. She would have been amazing. And it came down to confidence. It was just a confidence issue. She didn't feel ready. So I said, okay, well, next time. And then after a couple of months, she asked me to be her mentor. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is great. We're going to get you into that leadership role. So for me, when the opportunity came to get involved in the UK Sister Society, it was like, yeah, definitely, because that was the gap I can see. And I can see it happening again and again, that it's a confidence issue. So it's not skills, it's certainly not experience, but it's confidence, people lacking that confidence to step up into those leadership roles. So our sister society is very much focused on building confidence within females within the credit union movement in the UK. And when I talk about our sister society, I'm always saying, well, our purpose is that all these amazing women then end up with the same level of confidence as a mediocre man. That's what we want. So I'm sure you've all heard that saying, but we can see it happening, and we want to build that confidence. So we've done loads of training around imposter syndrome and resilience and confidence building. So that's been the kind of focus of our sister society. We're fairly new. We're still getting our profile up. So I think last year awareness of our Global Women's Network was about 34%, but this year it's 54%. So we're definitely building on that. And we're trying to build community in lots of different ways, whether that's online communities or face-to-face or these very popular webinars that we've been running as a collective. So that's just a little bit about our background. But yeah, very similar story, even though our sizes might be vastly different.
Yes, yes. I love that so much. And whenever I hear that, the first thing that comes to my mind is that as women, we tend to be the, type of personality that we have to check every single box before we feel like we can go for it. And what, history has shown us is that we don't have to check every single box. And when we have communities like this, that's what can help us, fill those other boxes. So thank you for sharing that. I love the work that you're doing. When you think about that, that leads us to our next question of, what has it meant to be a part of a global community like Global Women's Leadership Network?
So we attempted to set up a sister society just before lockdown. And I think partly lockdown and partly time and resources and all of that, it didn't quite get up off the ground. And then one of the WACU conferences mid-COVID was in Glasgow. So it's in Scotland in the UK. So lots of us went to that conference and we met Lena in person, and I attended the Global Women's session, and it was just really inspiring to hear other people's stories. And then Lena, with her support around, this is what we can offer. These are the things you can do. This is the direction you can take your sister society. Again, what you're saying, it doesn't have to be one size fits all. It can be very much tailored to your movement or what people are asking for. So then we got our national trade body engaged as well through that, and they put some resource behind it in terms of just helping us organise meetings, a small budget that we can invite speakers along or hold in-person events. We've held drinks receptions, things like that at our national conferences. So it was just the inspiration came from that global network, the fact that other people are doing it, and the fact that we could tailor it to what we wanted it to be. So it was really that kickstarting us in terms of that journey, and knowing that there was a framework in place and people are already doing it. It was really helpful. It got us over that hump of we don't quite know what we're doing or where we're going with this. It was just, actually, this is yours. Here's a framework, and you can operate under this global network brand. So yeah, it was great. And also the pink helped. It really does. I'm not wearing pink today, but when we go to our conferences, we make sure, okay, let's wear something pink. So it, visually it creates a community as well, doesn't it? When people are kind of saying, yeah, I might not know you, but I'm kind of part of that organization.
Yeah, I immediately know I can talk to you and have a connection. Yes. The other thing, I had the opportunity to attend that same Global Women's event in Scotland. And one of the things that I love about Global Women's is that they can speak to the heart and the mind. And I love that, there's data behind things. So that speaks to the mind and the facts. And then you have these impact stories, which really speaks to the heart. So thank you always for that representation, Lena. Last question for you, Kira, is can you share a moment when this community has made a real difference?
Yeah, so very similar to one of the stories Lena told, but I went to one of our regional conferences, and I was representing Global Women's, was trying to get more awareness out there and get more people involved. And someone put their hand up and said, oh, I attended the imposter syndrome webinar that you ran. And when we run those sessions, we don't see who's behind it. We know they're very popular. Like there's lots of registrations, lots of people turn up, but we're not, it's a speaker and then tends to be people sat behind it. So we never really understand the impact that it has. But someone said, after I watched that, I went to my boss and asked for some training around sort of management skills. And then they got a promotion. So that, it's those stories, isn't it? Those little things that, we might never even have known that, had we not been at that session. But it was very, very powerful to say, actually, we meet and we organize these sessions and we know they're popular, but you never quite see the stories behind it. So, getting that feedback, and now that's one of our kind of key quotes that we share when we're trying to get more people involved. So for me, that was really powerful. And just personally, I'm surrounded by amazing female CEOs, all, here in Greater Manchester, as I mentioned in my biography. there's 14 credit unions that we collaborate really well together, and we've developed products together. We're not quite a CUSO, but that's our long-term aim to get to that. And there's just some amazing women in there. And when I first started in my role, the generosity of their time and their resources and their policies, anything like that, it was really, really welcome. And, like Linda was saying, being able to share some of the challenges of being a female CEO in a very small organization where you are the IT guy, you are the HR person, you are answering the phones when you need to, that there's a lot of pressures on that. So being able to share things with other people that you trust, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's like trust. Who do you trust? Who can you rely on? Who's got your back? And I think that's, gives a lot of confidence to women in leadership as well. You can sometimes second guess yourself or think, oh, I haven't got all the answers. But if someone's got your back and they're saying, yeah, you can do it. And one of my kind of big learnings through this process is that if you see someone that's good, you've got to tell them, particularly women, tell them that they're good, tell them that they've got leadership opportunities, or, you can see them in that position in the future. And because that made a huge difference for me when someone said that to me. It was only a throwaway comment, but you could be CEO of such and such. And it really stuck with me. So I always make sure to tell people and tell, and the other women, female CEOs are great at that, but it's been really intentional about it and telling people that, they are good and that they've got these opportunities. So for me, that's what our network is about. I think we do a lot of stuff online because in the UK, traveling an hour is quite far for us. We don't like going that far. 2 hours is an overnight stay. We don't, so we do a lot of stuff online. But I think what we want to do longer term is build networks, like local networks where you can, because I'm in a fortunate position as a CEO to have that network of CEOs. But I know that there's people in my organization and people not in that position of power where you feel like you could go and have a coffee with someone. The power of being able to just go and have that conversation with someone is much more effective than, spending a day at your desk sometimes, just having that outlet. So we want to create more of those in-person networks, but it is about building up the reputation of the sister society, getting more awareness out there and get more people engaged. So that's where we are at the minute. We're just building our sister society. But the webinars and things that we've run have been really popular. We've had some really inspirational speakers at our national conference, and it's a story now that people can hear whooping, from the Global Women's Room. And apparently the regulator was doing a session in the next room. So, so we're building on that. And I think we also want to build on some of the fun that we have. So we've done a few walks. So someone went, my ambition this year is to walk up a mountain. It's like, okay, well, let's do that. It's a Global Women's Network. So we went and we walked up a mountain one day, and that was great. We did a walk recently that went from the Emmeline Pankhurst statue in Manchester, which is the founder of the suffragette movement, right up to Elizabeth Gaskell House, who was a feminist writer. So that was a really interesting journey that we just walked and talked. And, there's some very experienced female CEOs there and some really young women that came along as well. And we had tea and cake and it was lovely, so those opportunities to connect. We want to build more of that. So, yeah. Young, but we're definitely passionate about what we do and we want to do more. So I would never thought to come to like an American session, or I know Lena, you're always telling us about the calendar, but I think maybe just making the effort to go to that calendar and get involved in more things would be, I think definitely take that as a way as a thing to do more of.
Thank you so much, Kira, and so many amazing takeaways. I love the walk and talks. I love the just tell them, tell people when you see their talents. So thank you so much. All right, we're going to transition over to our next member, who is a member of CUWLA, Elaine Thompson. Elaine Thompson is the president and CEO of Seaport Federal Credit Union, and she brings over 25 years of industry experience and previously served as CFO for nearly 2 decades at her credit union. So like Linda said, growing up in the credit union, Elaine is a beautiful model of that. She's passionate about developing future leaders and is deeply involved in mentoring and advancing leadership across the credit union community. So Elaine, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. We wanted to kick it off and have you share with the group, why did you join CUWLA?
Well, thank you for the introduction, first of all. And, it was kind of accidental how I came upon CUWLA. I met Lily, one of the founders at GAC, and I was a brand new CEO. As you said, I've only been in this role about 3 years. And I joined really not knowing much about it. But as soon as we had our first meeting, when I was on the first meet and greet, I just knew like this is great. Like this is going to really help me because I had been in the credit union industry so long, but not as CEO. And from the outside looking in as CEO, I don't think you realize how much it takes and how many different areas you're pulled. I really thought I had a good handle having all the experience I had, and it was really new to me. So having that collaboration with all these CEOs from all over, from different sizes, really helped me during my transition.
Yeah, it brings me back to what Linda said earlier of like sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so
Yeah.
having this community. So what surprised you most about the CULA community when you joined?
I think just about how every CEO, even though we have similar stories, we have such different stories, and I realized, especially, I came in as CEO after someone who was here for 3 decades, and it made me realize I don't need to continue to do everything exactly the same way. Every CEO has to find their way and figure out what they're bringing to the table. And seeing all of these CEOs from across the country, and yes, we're all considered smaller because we're at the time we were under 300 million, but still we were varying sizes. Like you said, we have 5 million and then we have 250 million. And I'm right in the middle at around 100. So it was very interesting to see and just inspiring because some of these credit unions, and let me tell you, small but mighty, I tease that I have all these CEO peers that are just rock stars for me and inspiration for me and help me build my confidence and also know that I don't have to follow along with everything that's always been. I can kind of, bring in my own version of things and where I want the credit union to be. And then I really was excited because I had so much support from my board when I did do this, when I finally had that confidence and really embraced being CEO. And CULA, I think, really helped me get to that point.
Yeah. So when you think about that in particular, what was like a true leadership moment or this aha moment that you had from some of your CULA
Yeah.
connections?
Yeah, so you asked me that, and it's so hard because I've had so many. But I think one of the moments I had, which is funny, I think it was my first GAC, and seeing we've had many CULA winners of the Herb Wagner Awards, which I would never even go to those dinners, but because I said, oh, I have to be supportive, and to see not just my CULA sister, but even the other people. And, here I am thinking, I want to do this and this, and I want to help this community. And I'm thinking, I'm making a difference, which I am. But to see what some of the other people have done, and I have this CULA sister who I can relate to and that I have a friendship with, and it was just inspiring. And again, it was like a wake up call, like, okay, I know I have a lot on my plate, but I can do more. And seeing again, I have a lot of CULA sisters that just blow my mind. I don't know how they have time for all the things they do. But it takes me to another level. And I could give you so many examples. But just one other in another direction. Sometimes when I'm struggling with day to day and I need something, Linda had mentioned, I know that if I really need something, to go to my CULA sisters first. That's the first place I go. And I ask, like I was trying to get information for my board because I was really fighting for something for my staff and for myself. And they always come through. So those scenarios also, like I know if I really need something, I have so many people to reach out to, and that makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Elaine. And I think back to, some of the comments that even when Lena started and talking about the volunteerism with the sister societies and what you're sharing with the CUWLA sisters of the Herb Wagner. And at the end of the day, as women, we tend to be leading with servant leadership and servant hearts. And that is really what's resonating here. And just feeling inspired that my mantra when it comes to, volunteerism is when you have an opportunity presented, say yes. And yeah, it might stretch you, and yeah, it might be, make you a little thin on your bandwidth, but that seems like that's what's resonating with you too. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, before we open it up to the full panel, I wanted to have an opportunity for folks to just throw in the chat, what does community look like for you? Whether you are a Global Women's Network member or a CUWLA member, we would love to see some of the love thrown about and read the chats a little bit later. So, but now let's transition it for all of the speakers. So we're going to turn it back to you, Lena, and start us off. When you think about career, when in your career did you most need community?
I thought about that question a little bit because, your immediate thought is, oh, when you were younger starting out, but that is just so not true. I really think you need it at all stages of your career, right? And for those who, don't know, oftentimes I've shared the story where our family emigrated to the U.S. when I was 4 from Greece, if you guys can't tell from my last name. And then I ended up going back to Greece and living and working there and in Central, Western, and Eastern Europe for a number of years, and then back to the U.S. So I often say I've been an immigrant, 3 times between 2 countries. And there were those stages of the in between in the career, you needed community because when I came back to the US, right, I was an experienced professional, but I was literally starting from scratch my career here again, right, and in a completely different environment, having to connect with individuals who I didn't know. And I literally just started reaching out to people using whatever I could at that point, from LinkedIn. And I think the community that I established and then ended up working for a community, right, sort of helped me even more so. But I truly think we need it at all stages of our life for different reasons. And I think the important thing is to remember is that you're going to have different networks or communities, if you will, connected to you, right? Your professional, your work through those who have children from their children's activities, but you're also going to have different types of professional networks. There's a core group of people that I would reach out to assist me, right, on a day-to-day basis for something with work, and then that ring goes one level out. What is that second level and what is that third level, right? I can't reach out to all the members of Global Women's for my day-to-day question, but there are individuals from Global Women's who I do rely on for a variety of things. So you do need them, I think, at all times, and the different types of communities and how you make that, network or community work for you.
Yeah, that's
That's
such a good
my thought.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's ever evolving, it'll continue. Excellent. Thank you. Linda, we're going to turn it over to you. What does support from women leaders look like in practice?
No judgment. And I think one of the things people ask me, like, Linda, you retired from your career and now you're working again. I think it is to, like I said, pay it forward, that no judgment zone, and always remember, what was that like for you 20 years ago? I tell people all the time, it's like, I remember what it was like to be a CEO of a $3 million credit union and not know anything, including how to read the financial statement. And to go ahead and to see our members that are maybe at that stage, or some that may know more than somebody always knows more than you. Someone always needs your help. So I think it's really that no judgment zone, and remember when you didn't know something and to pay it forward.
Love that. That was like a mic drop right there. Thank you, Linda. All right, Kira, over to you. How can leaders create that same sense of community in their organizations?
Thank you. So I think it's very similar to what's been said. I think it's creating that space for people and the opportunity for people. So my organisation, we've just employed our very first man this week. So we were all women. And I think, we need to create space for him. So I'm really keen that we make sure that, he is, and I think he will fit in really well. But in terms of our organisation, because we are a small team, we're a small credit union, so we work really well together. I think, we can vent to each other and have very strong differences of opinion, but then we move on quite quickly. And I'm not sure if that's just a female thing, but it's definitely something within the culture that, there's no blame, no judgment. People can, we very much respect everyone's opinions. Because we're a small team, we can move forward together. So any sessions that I run around product development or customer journey or whatever, everyone's invited. So there's no exclusions to say, oh, this is only our senior management team, or only this person could come or that person. So, we very much encourage anyone with an opinion to come along. And we've got an innovation committee as well, again, where anyone can bring anything to. And we've had some kind of wild and wacky ideas. So it's very much nothing's off the table. In terms of my team. And again, if there's any sort of training or conference opportunities, everyone has the opportunity to come. So it's not, oh, this is only available to senior managers or anyone in a position of responsibility. So I think we are small enough to be able to do that. And I think, having a small team that works very closely together, it's easier to foster that community. So my concern at the minute is that we're going to be merging with another credit union. So consolidation within the UK sector is now happening. So we've got about 250 very, very small credit unions, as I mentioned, and there's pressure from the regulator and cost pressures, all sorts of pressures to consolidate. So we are going to be doubling the size of our team, and we'll have more men and everything, so we'll have to manage more men. But so I think this is a really interesting question to how do you foster community when you get bigger. So being able to invite everyone to everything probably isn't as feasible as it is at the minute. So I think I need to take that one away and reflect. So it's easy in a small team. When you're running a small credit union, community is everywhere. But as you get bigger and potentially more commercial, then how do you make sure that you maintain that? And I'm hoping that the culture of our board and myself, we can continue to have that kind of culture within the credit union. But it is something I'm going to reflect on, actually. And if anyone's got any experience, as you
It looks like in the chat you did get somebody to say that so reach out to Kathleen. Maybe you guys can share emails on this chat before we close. But thank you so much, Kira. All right, Elaine, over to you. What advice would you give a leader who feels isolated today?
So, yeah, they say it gets lonely at the top, right? But it's not even just at the top. So, I would suggest finding a peer group, just as I did with CUWLA, whether it's CUWLA for CEOs, CUWLA Rise for people reporting to CEOs. But, a lot of people rely on people within their credit union, which that is good for some things. But I think it's important to find peers outside of the credit union. To build a network outside of the credit union, to have that out of box viewpoint, to see what other people are doing and what they're suggesting, but also it's just the collaboration, the support. It will help build your confidence, and it makes you feel not so lonely because you realize that a lot of the struggles you're going through, there's a lot of other people going through it and can relate, and maybe they can help you with a solution, or sometimes it's just good to be able to know that you're not in it alone. So my big advice is find a peer group that you have something in common with, and then lean on them and let them lean on you as well.
Oh, beautiful way to wrap us up. Thank you, Elaine. When we think about our time together, really what we're hearing the sentiment of is that we are not alone, and we each bring community to the spaces that we show up in and show up for. So thank you everyone so much for an amazing time today. Our call to action is to stay connected with each other, reach out to another leader, and get involved in your communities. As Elaine said, leadership can feel lonely at times, but when we come together like we do in today's sessions, we're reminded that our strength comes from one another, and community matters, and each one of you are part of that. So thank you, thank you. Lena, Linda, any closing thoughts?
I'd like to, one closing thought, because we do have a couple of men from our communities on the call, and I want to use an expression we use at Global Women. We say we for she, right? We hear about a he for she, and I know we're talking about women in leadership, but it is important also you can be leaning on people in your community who happen not to be identifying as the same gender as you are. So it is important to include the we for she's as part of your community as well. At least we can on the Global Women's side. I know specifically for CUWLA it is a little different, but I know there are a lot of amazing male leaders in the community also here championing us and being part of us, help elevating us. And in all honesty, the ones that I challenge too that help me become a better leader myself, right? Because hey, bring it on. So thank you for them who are on the call with us today. They are part of us learning together, and I think we're all on a continuous onward journey to learn together. Thank you for this community, and hope our paths cross again very, very soon. I'm sure they will with many of you. Thank you for Kiera for being with us later in the evening in the UK, and all of our global friends. I saw a lot of countries represented here. Thank you, CUWLA, and I know we'll keep talking. Linda, over to you.
Thank you. Well, Lena, we did it. We did our first joint meeting together with Global Women's and CUWLA to celebrate International Women's Month. And it's just been amazing. Everybody on here can join Global Women's. And so we're going to say that. Many of you are members. And if you do fit in line, I did put the link in there about CUWLA. It's just really wonderful to see how we work together, even as organizations, and just to be there and to see this amazing support of each other. And again, yes, it's just what a wonderful way to start our day.